Well, I never thought I'd be reviewing something like this early, but here we are. Today we'll be taking a look at the 5th generation Kohler Wellworth toilet, or the original or older Wellworth Waterguard. Introduced in 1974, it would be made up until 1985. There is a lot of conflicting opinions about this toilet. Some people think it's overrated, some people think it's underrated. What do I think of it? Well, it's definitely interesting, but for a vintage toilet, especially with its competition like, say, something like the Gerber Mount Vernon or even the 4th generation American Standard Cadet, this thing is a little bit underwhelming. But let's take a look at it and see what it has to offer. I'm going to be honest, I don't really care for this overall design. The base looks interesting, but the tank just looks weird and goofy. It's just way too small, and if it had the design of something like the 2nd generation Barrington tank, it would definitely look a lot better, but we're stuck with this, which is kind of weird looking, and not in a good way. Well, personally to me. The trap reopening is very interesting, but very questionable. Some people would call it a corn seed trap, which I can understand the resemblance. And it also has a siphon jet towards the bottom, as you can see. The tank parts are pretty simplistic, but they can be interchanged if you want them to. Obviously this one has replacement parts like the handle, the fill valve, and even the flapper it looks like. Usually this would have a ball cock fill valve. Overall the tank parts are simplistic, but they are what I like them to be. Very simple. Nothing complex or proprietary. Let's have a look at a flush. The flush is okay, nothing to write home about. One of the weirdest problems this toilet has is quality control. It really isn't that good, from inconsistent rim jets, siphons, and even flushes. I'm going to be comparing this one to 2 other 5th generation Wellworths in this building, and you can definitely see the differences between the flushes. Yeah, it's very inconsistent. With that in mind, the pulling and siphon power is pretty mixed. Generally not the greatest. Obviously, due to the quality control being very inconsistent, the flushes and siphons can be very inconsistent too. And that's not really a good thing you want to see with this toilet. The performances are also pretty mixed too. This has to do with both the quality control and of course the trap reopening and passages, which are pretty small. Sometimes you'll find one that performs fine, other times you'll find one that clogs often. Fun fact, I actually clogged one before making this video, so it is very inconsistent. And that's kind of disappointing. Now let's take a look at bowl rinse. For the most part, it seems okay. The bowl really isn't that deep, but I definitely think the rim jets could have been better quality and applied a little bit better. But I've definitely seen far worse. And that's the 5th generation Kohler Wellworth toilet, or the original Kohler Wellworth Waterguard. A very interesting and weird mixed bag. It's far from the worst Kohler toilet, but it's definitely a little bit underwhelming too. Sure, this was an early 3.5 gallon toilet and they would have definitely improved, but there definitely could have been some improvements with this model too, considering that it is a little bit underwhelming. But let's put this toilet into the grading scale. Let's grade it. Let's talk about the overall design, because honestly I don't really care for it. The bowl is pretty simplistic and basic enough, but the tank just looks so stupid on it. If only it looked similar to like the 2nd generation Kohler Barrington, it actually wouldn't look too bad. But currently, it looks kind of stupid. I have to give it a 4. Like always, the tank parts are pretty simplistic, but they can be interchanged, which is a nice thing. Simplicity is always a nice feature, so I give it a 6. Let's talk about the quality control, because it really isn't the best. Probably the biggest problem is the inconsistent flushes and rim jets. Comparing many different 5th generation Kohler Wellworths to one another is kind of crazy, and you can definitely see a variety of flushes between most of them, which is not really the best. Some are slower, some are faster. And I don't like that inconsistency at all. But it's probably the biggest problem is that the quality control really isn't the most top-notch. Not to mention the inconsistent performances too. At most, I give it a 5. The trapway design, just put it simply, is bad. There's really no sugarcoating it. The trapway opening is small as well as the passages. I don't know what they were thinking with this. It's a 4. I'm going to be honest, the flush is alright. It's honestly nothing too special. Ignoring the fact that the flushes can be very inconsistent in terms of power level and siphon power, there really isn't much to the flush. It's a pretty simplistic swirly flush. Not the best, but not the worst either. I give it a 6. Considering how inconsistent the pulling and siphon powers are, it's pretty middle of the road. Obviously, the weaker ones you get, the worse they are. The powerful ones you get are slightly better. Again, it's still very inconsistent, and I don't really care for that. I give it a 5. Yeah, the trapway design is just pretty bad. It's honestly kind of pathetic. But to be fair, I have definitely seen worse. I noticed that the round ones perform a little bit better compared to the elongated ones, but even then, it still can be very inconsistent. At most, I give it a 5. The ball rinse is alright. Ignoring the fact that the ramjet quality could definitely be a little bit better, the ball really isn't necessarily anything too deep and actually kind of covers it fairly well. Maybe outside of some corners here or there. It's not the worst, but you kind of expect a little bit better from this toilet. I give the ball rinse a 6. Considering the mixed qualities of this toilet, the survivability is pretty mixed. If it has some poor quality control issues and performs worse, yeah, it's definitely not going to last all that well. But if you get a decent one, it might last a little bit longer. Again, it's basically just a mixed bag. I frankly don't care for that, honestly. I give it a 5. Now let's talk about the overall value of this toilet. So this is basically an early 3.5 gallon toilet if you think about it, introduced all the way back in 1974. And I gotta say, this toilet is a perfect testament to basically the 3.5 gallon era. A very hit or miss era. And this thing is basically a mixed bag. Sure, the flush and ball rinse is okay, but everything else is just fairly mixed, like the performance, quality control, and even more. I ain't going to argue this is the worst toilet ever, but if you pair this up to something like the 4th generation American Standard Cadet, or even the 4th generation Kohler Wellworth toilet, the generation before this, those things basically kick this thing's butt and it's not even close. But if you compare it to some of the modern selection, it definitely is a little bit better. This toilet is definitely quite interesting, but I feel like it definitely could have been a lot better than what it was. At the end of the day, if you think about it, it's just kind of a whatever toilet. So I'm giving the value a 5. The final score of the original Kohler Wellworth Waterguard toilet, or the 5th generation Kohler Wellworth toilet, is a 51 out of 100. Yep, this toilet is a peak mixed bag, and that really isn't the greatest thing. Sure, it's not the worst thing in the world, but compared to some other vintage toilets around this timeline, there are so many other vintage toilets around this time that were so much better than this toilet. And frankly, that's kind of a shame, because there was some potential with this model, but what they executed was a pretty middle-of-the-road toilet. For better or for worse.